Greetings to all viewers. You are watching the Ruslan Belov channel. Today's review is dedicated to an analysis of the international situation as of April 3, 2026. The past 24 hours have brought us many extremely significant reports, so I suggest we lose no time and proceed with the analysis. We begin with a detailed examination of the situation in the Ukrainian conflict zone. On the night of April 3rd, the forces of the Russian Federation carried out another large-scale attack, utilizing hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles and dozens of missiles of various modifications. The first arrivals were recorded as early as the evening of April 2, 2026, with the epicenter of the clashes during that period being the outskirts of Kharkiv. Throughout the night, numerous video materials of objective control were received, demonstrating the strikes on various quarters of Kharkiv, as well as strikes on industrial and infrastructural facilities. According to information from various sources, up to 91 drones of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and at least 4 Iskander missile systems were deployed during the initial stage of the aerial battle for the Kharkiv sky. Analyzing the flow of information from this direction, one can conclude that the primary task of the Russian side was to suppress the air defense systems of the armed forces of Ukraine around Kharkiv to create a clear space for subsequent attacks deeper into the country. Once the active phase of the battle over Kharkiv concluded, the first images documenting the approximate routes and locations of the Russian unmanned aerial vehicles at specific time intervals began to appear in the public domain. This array of data began to arrive between 5 and 7 o'clock in the morning on April 3, 2026. It was during these hours that the first groups of drones crossed into the airspace of Ukraine. The initial echelon of drones was largely neutralized by Ukrainian air defense assets. The graphic materials show how the yellow marks designating the Russian drones gradually disappeared from radar screens. This testifies to the relatively high effectiveness of the air defense systems of the armed forces of Ukraine in the first minutes of the attack. However, in the interval from 7 to 10 hours in the morning, the situation changed. Judging by the updated footage, after the first hours of intensive counteraction, the Russian unmanned aerial vehicles began to advance almost unhindered into the heart of central Ukraine in massive groups and swarms. The photographs captured the first wave of drones, numbering several dozen units, which moved from the Sumy and Kharkiv regions in the direction of the Cherkasy region. A systematic movement of this cloud of targets is observed. Next, events developed according to an unusual scenario. Upon reaching the Cherkasy region, this group of Russian unmanned aerial vehicles ceased movement and hovered over the region, awaiting the arrival of the second echelon of drones of a similar number. As soon as a single strike formation of approximately 100 units was formed in the area of the Cherkasy and Pavlohrad regions, it began moving northwest toward Kyiv and the surrounding region. By approximately 9 o'clock in the morning, the first video recordings became available, confirming the strikes by dozens, if not hundreds, of drones on various buildings and structures in the capital and the region. Since the attack took place during daylight hours, many clear shots of the consequences of these arrivals have been published on the internet. Following the completion of the drone operation over Kyiv, when most of the drones of the Russian Federation had already fulfilled their tasks, were shot down or suppressed, the first cruise missiles, specifically of the Kh-101 type, crossed the Ukrainian border. They entered from the direction of the Luhansk region. It is likely that the launches were carried out from the waters of the Caspian Sea, which is a traditional launch site for Russian strategic aviation. Several dozen missiles moved toward the Dnipropetrovsk region. Until a certain point, it remained unclear where they would turn after passing north of Kryvyi Rih, southwest toward Odessa, northwest toward Kiev, or further west toward Lutsk and Ivano-Frankivsk. After the missiles continued their path to the west, the Odessa direction was excluded, but the final goal remained a mystery. At a certain moment, the Kh-101 missiles sharply changed their trajectory, setting a course for Kiev and the surrounding region. Soon, information began to arrive regarding a massive strike on the settlement of Korostan. This specific area became the main target of the strategic aviation of the Russian Federation. A huge number of powerful explosions were recorded there. Local sources published footage of the destruction showing that as a result of the combined attack of drones and missiles on the night of April 3, 2026, entire street blocks were literally wiped off the face of the earth. Later, the Defense Department of Ukraine provided official data on the scale of the nighttime raid. According to their information, the Russian side utilized a total of 579 means of aerial attack, missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles. While this is not an absolute record for a single strike, the scale is nonetheless impressive. If we sum this with the attacks over the previous 2 days, when about 1,000 drones were launched, then the 3-day operation becomes perhaps the most powerful since the beginning of the conflict. Slightly later, a detailed map of all flight missions for the Russian missiles and drones was released. On it, the routes of the Geran and Gerbera unmanned aerial vehicles are marked in yellow. The trajectories of the Kh-101 cruise missiles flying to Korostan are in red. Strikes by Iskander systems are highlighted in orange. These were carried out first, starting on the evening of April 2nd, against Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, and the Dnipropetrovsk region, with the aim of disabling air defense systems. Only after the suppression of the defense were hundreds of drones launched into the sky, with the Kh-101 missiles serving as the final chord. That same night, the Ukrainian side attempted a retaliatory massive strike. Pro-Ukrainian resources distributed a map demonstrating a chaotic distribution of drones across almost the entire length of the eastern border with the Russian Federation. It was reported that 280 unmanned aerial vehicles were deployed, but no data on any results of this attack was received during the day of April 3rd. At the same time, Russian channels published video recordings of the strike on a chemical plant in the area of the city of Shostka. Judging by the footage, the plant sustained extremely heavy damage. To summarize, it can be stated that an unprecedented strike has been delivered to the territory of Ukraine over the last 72 hours. To recall the chronology, April 1st, an attack by hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles. 2 waves, no fewer than 700 units. On the night of April 2nd, another 150 drones, and on the night of April 3rd, 579 missiles and drones. In total, this amounts to between 1,300 and 1,500 strike assets over 3 days. This is a colossal figure, but the intensity and frequency of the attacks are what matter most. Such a tactic prompts certain reflections. Since the start of the combat operations in Ukraine, the Russian side has resorted to such ultra-frequent strikes on energy and logistics hubs in only one case, immediately before the start of a large-scale offensive. This pattern was observed in both 2023 and 2024. Decisive ground operations always followed a series of exhausting massive raids. When analyzing the situation on the line of contact over the past 24 hours, we see a relative lull in terms of position changes. Only specific new infiltration zones have appeared, but the front remains stable. The combination of the powerful aerial strikes of the last 3 days with the lack of movement on the ground suggests that the Russian troops are completing the final stage of regrouping their forces. Most likely, a general offensive will begin in the coming week, immediately after Easter. Until April 12th, several more such massive aerial attacks can be expected, after which the Russian units will move to active operations. The window of opportunity for intensive fighting will be about a month, until the start of the May holidays, after which the spring campaign will smoothly transition into the summer one. As for local changes over the day, the most important news comes from the area of Dobropilya. The zone of presence of Russian forces west of Novoshakovo and north of Belitske has expanded. Thus, by the present moment, the advanced diversionary and reconnaissance groups of the Russian Federation are located only a couple of kilometers from the outskirts of Dobropilya. In Kostiantynivka, the advancement of reconnaissance groups in the central quarters is noted. Russian forces are striving to close the ring around the grouping of the armed forces of Ukraine in the southern part of the city. Judging by the operational data, the Ukrainian garrison holding positions along the H-32 highway and Myroshnichenko Street may already be in a state of complete encirclement with no paths for retreat. There are no exact figures on the number of those surrounded yet, but the situation for them appears critical. No significant changes have been recorded in the Kupiansk, Lyman and Sloviansk directions. There, apparently, preparations and the relocation of reserves are also underway. Having concluded the review of the Ukrainian theater of operations, let us turn to events in the Middle East. We begin with the position of the United States of America. The President of the United States continues to make tough statements regarding the Middle East crisis. Today, he posted video footage on his social media of strikes on strategic targets, bridges in the vicinity of Tehran. The American leader emphasized that 3 key bridges have already been put out of operation in 24 hours and threatened to continue the destruction of infrastructure if Iran does not agree to sign a deal. The video captures the consequences of yesterday's attacks. Several spans of the Tehran bridges have collapsed, and their restoration is unlikely in the coming months, at least until the end of the active phase of the conflict. Despite pressure from the White House, Tehran categorically refuses to accept the terms of surrender or to proceed with an imposed peaceful settlement. The realization of the dead-end nature of the situation is apparently present in Washington as well. Today, reports surfaced of large-scale personnel shifts in the American generalship. Many high-ranking officers were removed from their posts, including the 41st Chief of the General Staff of the United States. The reasons why Secretary of War Hegseth decided to decapitate the military leadership right now are not precisely clear, but they may be due to the obvious failure of the Middle Eastern strategy. It is worth recalling that as a result of Iranian missile strikes, expensive United States defense property, including radars and air defense systems worth billions of dollars, was almost completely destroyed. But the loudest scandal involved incidents with American aviation, which was previously considered invulnerable. Reports are arriving that at least one United States Air Force aircraft, presumably the latest F-35, was damaged or shot down in the skies over Iran. Video footage of coalition forces patrolling southern areas of Iran in attempts to find the pilot's ejection site is proliferating online. Iranian media have already demonstrated the debris of the pilot's seat from this aircraft, which confirms the seriousness of the situation. The Iranian authorities have even promised a monetary reward for the capture or discovery of the American pilot. A grave signal for the United States was today's passage through the Strait of Hormuz of a tanker under the French flag. I recall that previously Trump stated the impossibility of unblocking the strait without large-scale military intervention and a ground operation. However, the European allies, France, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, refused to provide their airspace for the needs of the United States. Now we observe how Iran, in response to this neutrality, allowed French vessels to freely cross the strait. This deals a heavy blow to the prestige of the United States, Israel, and the entire coalition, as it turns out that the blockage of Hormuz applies only to their vessels, while other countries retain the right of navigation. Iran also continues to attack the digital infrastructure of the region. Facilities belonging to giants such as Oracle and AWS, as well as internet mainlines, came under strike. The coalition, in turn, is showing anomalous aviation activity in southeastern Iran, in areas bordering Pakistan. Some experts view these strikes as preparation for a landing operation. It is likely that the sudden dismissal of several key American generals is connected with plans for such a ground operation. Perhaps they simply did not want to take responsibility for an adventure involving the landing of 15,000 to 20,000 paratroopers against Iran's million-man army, understanding the catastrophic consequences of such a step. It is not excluded that their resignation was a consequence of refusing to carry out such an order. Meanwhile, Tehran continues to escalate the situation. Today, a list of potential targets for the next strikes was published, among which key bridges of the Middle East are listed. The destruction of these facilities could turn into a catastrophe for the entire region. For example, the King Fahd Causeway, linking Saudi Arabia with Bahrain, appears on the list. In fact, Bahrain is connected to the mainland only through this crossing, and its destruction would instantly cause a humanitarian collapse in the nation of 1 million people due to the cessation of food and goods supplies. One would hope that the coalition realized all the risks when they decided to strike the bridges in Tehran. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe to our channel and leave your likes. Until we meet again.